Vidyananda.
ॐ नमो भगवते वैवस्वताय मृत्यवे ब्रह्मविद्याचार्याय नचिकेतसे च the second verse that we are on. I will just chant and we can continue with the discussion. श्रेयश्च प्रेयश्च मनुष्यमेतः तौ सम्परीत्य विविनक्ति धीरः श्रेयो हि धीरो अभिप्रेयसो वृणीते प्रेयो मन्दो योगक्षेमाद् वृणीते. One becomes a manda, says the Kathopanishad, says Lord Yama. Manda means the one with the brain fog in the form of a mix-up of priorities. So just like a stomach upset, the brain is slightly upset. And so there is a mix-up of priorities. And because of the mix-up of priorities, one goes for something that is very easily available, very easily discernible. I should use the word discernible, very easily tangible, graspable. This is the problem, because that which the majority goes after and that which is easily available is not that which is necessarily all the time good for oneself. Just because everybody else is after it, that doesn't mean I should also go after it. And so the manda is unable to make this discrimination, because the manda is a person who is bogged down by other burdens. The cause of this brain fog is the pressure of the raga and dveshas. As Bhagavan Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the, the raga and dvesha are not a problem by themselves, because he talks about this in one place by saying sarvesham buddhau ragadveshau vyavasthitau. In every buddhi, in every mind, in every heart, in every intellect, raga and dveshas predominate. Every mind, every heart is full of strong prejudices and strong preferences. Oh, that's great. That is wonderful. So why are we even discussing this if this is not a problem? Well, that it is at this point that Bhagavan Krishna asks us to read the fine print which is in the next line. Tayoho vasham na agachet tau hi asya purushasya paripanthinau. O ye jivas, don't come under their spell. Yes, every buddhi has raga and dvesha. Raga and dvesha are there, preferences is there in every antahkarana, every inner instrument called the heart, mind, whatever you want to call it, is full of raga and dvesha. But that doesn't mean you have to come under its sway. Tayor vasham na agaschet. Vasham means sway. Don't be enslaved by them. Tau means these two, raga and dvesha. Asya means for the seeker. Paripanthinau means inimical to you. They are inimical to your path, to your spiritual journey. This is a very big and important teaching, because from this we get the understanding that this is not about mind control or desire control. In fact, if you try to control the desires, the more you try to control them, and the more they will try to control you. And then somebody else said, you have to remove all the desires. Okay, try. How is that going for you? Because the one who is removing all the desires will be stuck with one desire. What is that? I have to remove all desires. I have to remove all desires. And then I have to remove the desire to remove the desire. Then I have to remove the desire to remove the desire to remove the desire. Then we'll be here forever. It is called infinite regress. In Sanskrit, it's a fallacy called anavastha dosha, the fallacy of infinite regress. You keep going round and round. So, and in modern psychology, we know this because we have started to use some other words that make more sense. Anger control, nobody says. Anger management. Desire management. Mind management. This Lord Krishna was saying that thousands of years ago. In fact, Freud and all the people, Jung, Freud, all the people should pay copyright to Bhagavad Gita. Should pay copyright to Lord Krishna. Because he makes the difference between the raga dvesha, between the desires that preponderate the mind and one's ability to not come under the sway. Consider the other verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Yash shaknoti ihaiva sodhum prak sharira vimokshanat kamakrodhodbhavam vegam sa buddhiman sa sukhi naraha. Yah shaknoti, the one that is able, capable of what? Ihaiva sodhum, to not be affected, to not come under the spell of what? Kama krodhodbhavam vegam, to come under the spell of the vega, the pressure created by the raga and dvesha. You see, the raga dveshas are there. We have to make them dormant. That is the management of the mind. The desire management is making the raga and dvesha dormant. If you don't make them dormant through sadhana, etc., then what happens is that you become a doormat for them. Yeah, dormant and dormant, there's only one N missing, okay? So, and you add one O, that's all it is. So, you have to make them dormant because they create a pressure for instant gratification. And if that pressure is succumbed to, then it is like a conflagration. There is no alam buddhi. Alam buddhi means a buddhi that says enough. No alam buddhi. No buddhi that says enough, and so therefore this is what is the problem. And because of this problem, we have to make sure that we have the ability, the skills to manage the raga and dvesha. If you are wondering why I am quoting the Kathopanishad, the Bhagavad Gita so much, when this is a series of talks on the Kathopanishad, I have a very good explanation, and that is the fact that the Bhagavad Gita and the Kathopanishad are very closely aligned. It appears that the Kathopanishad is the inspiration for the Bhagavad Gita, although it does take something or the other from other Upanishads also. But the Kathopanishad is the main inspiration. And the Bhagavad Gita shamelessly plagiarizes from the Kathopanishad and lifts entire verses with a few things changed here and there once in a while. And then the Bhagavad Gita has a pictorial symbol. What is the symbol? Everybody knows. In fact, in Indian homes and in ashrams, we hang this picture. There are 5 horses, and then the Lord Krishna is holding the reins, and Arjuna is sitting in the back looking sad because he has to fight, quote unquote, his own people, and Lord Krishna in the correct version is turning to Arjuna and giving him Upadesha, the teaching of the Atma, the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. This too has been lifted from the Kathopanishad in a section that is called Ratha Kalpana, the chariot allegory, which is again rife with symbolism, which is very important to our understanding of this what is it called, Raga Dvesha management business. So this whole metaphor of the chariot, very interesting. The chariot is the human body. Consider the chariot to be the human body. Why? Because when the chariot moves, it creaks, and when when you get up from the chair, the knees also make a creaking sound. See how much things they have in common. So the chariot is the body. So the Ratha Swami, the Ahankara, the one who owns up this body as me, is the rider of the chariot. And in the Bhagavad Gita, of course, it is Arjuna. By the time the Kathopanishad was channeled by the rishis, Arjuna was not yet born. So we are just talking of a general person sitting in the chariot. The Ratha Swami is the Ahankara that owns up the body, mind, sense complex, seated there. And then Lord Krishna, Bhagavan, is the Sarathi. Sarathi means the one who drives the chariot. The mind are the reins. The sense organs are the 5 horses. Why? Because they like to graze in the world of preyas, in the world of sense objects. They keep on grazing in the world of all the sense objects. Then what happens? Then this is the metaphor here is complete. So then it all centers on the buddhi, because the buddhi is in the seat of the driver. If the buddhi is aligned with Lord Krishna, then what happens? Then the chariot goes smoothly. The animals, in the form of the intelligent sense organs, are corralled with the reins. They take you to your destination, and the destination is, of course, Shreyas, as we have seen. They take you to moksha, because the road on which the chariot travels is dharma. Going on the road of dharma, and some in another way we can also say that one wheel of the chariot is dharma, another wheel of the chariot is karma yoga. So dharma and karma together are on the path of dharma, on the path of karma yoga. The chariot travels guided intelligently by the buddhi in the face of all kinds of temptations. And sometimes you come at the fork in the road. And then, this being a rural road in the forest, let us imagine there are no road signs. Unlike our other example, there is nothing that says dead end. No, it is both the roads are there. Then the chariot stops. Chariot means you, okay, along with the body, mind, sense complex and the driver. So the chariot stops, and then you wonder, which road should I take? And then you can only see both the roads up till a certain bend, the first bend, that's all. One road looks very alive. Something or the other is happening. Somebody is jumping up and down, and then everybody is selling their wares. It is like a mela. Mela means a fair. A fair, Fair, like a nice fair. And so it's a jolly affair to think of taking this road. There is a magician, and there is somebody who is, a fire eater and a fire thrower, somebody who is jumping through hoops. It looks very entertaining. Then there are booths on either side, somebody is selling something or the other. And then there are lots of people, because this is pre-pandemic, okay, so there were no physical distancing rules. So there are lots of people pushing one another, jostling. Everybody seems to be having a wonderful time. Yes, somebody is screaming in the background, some child is crying because it is lost, but those you ignore because predominantly it seems to be a very happening and a live place, and you are eager to see beyond the bend. And then you look at the other road. Nobody is there, just a few people in orange, chanting something. and just milling around in hushed tones, helping something. They are watering some plants on the road. Nothing, no, there doesn't seem like much is going on here. In fact, it is so quiet, you just want to avoid that road and you go where the numbers are there. As I said, there seems to be safety in numbers. So you go to this, you go to the edge of this road, and then you ask somebody, you call somebody, come here. Is this a nice road? Because I can't see beyond the bend. क्या है उधर? What happens beyond? Is it nice? Well, it is fun. It is okay. We are all in this together. Welcome. No problem. But what about the other road? Oh, we have heard that if you go to the other road, you don't come back. That's a very scary thing. To put it in the Bhagavad Gita, Yad Gatvana Nivartante Tadhama Paramam Mama. Bhagavan Krishna gives his address. You know, Natad Bhasayate Surya. Lord Krishna says, I live, my house. Where is my house? Let me give you the street address to my house. There the sun does not shine. Maybe there is some kind of a moonlight. This is spiritual romanticism. Maybe there is some kind of a nice moonlight, cool. न तद्भासयते सूर्यः न शशांको न पावकः. Neither the moon, or maybe there are some lovely fire lights, little lamps. न पावकः, no fire. And then how do I find your house? Yad gatva na nivartante. So first of all, it's a dark place. How do I going to find? No light at all. And then the scariest part here, if you don't understand this properly, yad gatva, going there, you don't come back. Na nivartante. Tad dhama paramam mama. That is my permanent and wonderful ultimate abode. So this was the clincher for the chariot person, and the chariot driver, said to the horses and turned them to the road which looked jolly. Unfortunately, that's the road of prayers. The buddhi was under the spell of brain fog. Because we can't go by looks alone. Whatever glitters is not gold, as we have seen from that old idiom, the maxim. All that glitters is not gold. All that looks wonderful and fun is not shreyas. Hidden behind that longing for objects is definitely shreyas. And so the development of viveka to choose the right road entails the various management and discipline at various levels. So the first level is at the sense level of the sense organs. And the sense organs are the ones that are just reporters. You cannot blame the sense organs for saying, I can smell some wonderful dish being cooked. You cannot cut off the nose and saying, bad nose, why did you smell that? The mind has to decide whether it's going to go for this or not. And that is the first level of discipline. This is the niyama, yama and niyama, which is discussed. This is what it is. So this is, at the level of the mind, the discipline, the ability to tell the mind, this is not the time to eat. It is neither breakfast time nor dinner time, and this is not the time to eat. And so the first level of pragraha or nigraha, the ability to hold, is at the level of the mind. And for the mind to be strong, it has to be in the hands of the buddhi. The buddhi, in the tradition, the mind and the buddhi are distinguished in a very technical way. Sankalpatmakam vikalpatmakam manaha. The mind is that faculty which, the manaha is that faculty in the mind which is always iffy. Should I do this? Should I not do this? Shall I go here? No, 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 I should go there. Should I study about Shreyas and prayers? Maybe I should, or maybe I shouldn't. This is the mind. The buddhi or the intellect is that faculty which is seen as the one that is a decision making faculty. And what is the decision making faculty? The one that says, of course you are going to study about Shreyas. What else is there for you to do? This is going to help you, can't you see? But what about that wonderful, dish that I'm smelling? That can wait until later. Right now, this is what you're going to do. This is the buddhi. The buddhi, for the buddhi to make the right decision, it has to be surrendered to the Lord. It has to be in tandem with the Lord, with Ishvara. Ishvara has to bless the buddhi and to dissipate the fog of the brain in the form of the overpowering raga and the dvesha. The buddhi has to be surrendered to the Lord. And this is how bhakti is incorporated, is part and parcel of karma and karma yoga. Without bhakti, there is no mukti at all. It's a package deal. And we have to be careful, especially in Vedanta circles. I keep hearing this all the time. Oh, if I have to be free, then why should I worship? Why should I pray? Why should I go to temple? Why should I do abhisheka? Why should I do homa? What is the reason? Well, if you are interested in moksha, you better start praying overtime, double time. That is the only way. Because what that devotion also is cultivated. Because in the light of the knowledge that these raga dveshas are taking me astray. This is the knowledge. I am helpless. I am helpless because these raga dveshas are taking me for a ride. This is what, one has to understand. And if I don't have a say over the raga and dvesha, I have to ask for help. And you can't ask for help for people around you because they also have their own raga and dvesha. And if you ask the help from the significant other, please help me free myself from the hold of this raga and dvesha, the significant other has a raga about your raga, about you not giving up your raga so that they can justify having their raga. It's all a wonderful, sad, codependent story of samsara. And so therefore, the help that comes has to come from a source that is infallible. As infallible as the laws that govern the mind. Sarvesham buddhau raga dveshau vyavasthitau. Just like every buddhi has the raga and the dvesha. But I need help to not come under its spell. So this is what takes one to the Lord. The non-fulfillment of raga and dvesha is the doorway to the Lord, is the gateway to bhakti oftentimes. Nobody comes to bhakti out of choice. People are brought to the Lord, people are brought to their knees, kicking and screaming in disappointment and anger and frustration that the raga and dvesha are not getting fulfilled. that I suddenly find myself that I am not the agent of action, much less the result of action, and I am not able to produce my own happiness or whatever I think is happiness. Because, I do the hard work, the neighbor gets the promotion. I cook, somebody else eats it up, and then, so therefore, there is no satisfaction, and there is a feeling of injustice centered on the I. There is a feeling of victimization in the face of millions of ragas and dveshas, and not even one getting fulfilled. This disappointment has to be taken to a place where it can be resolved. Oh, is that therapy? You can start at therapy, no problem. But the therapist also, has some problems or the other. The marriage counselor will be having problems in his or her own marriage, quite likely. And you go to the therapist, and then the therapist somehow says, well, it is all because of your background, your parentage. And the therapist is very validating and encouraging. If I had your kind of a parentage, I would not even get out of bed. At least you are holding a job and doing wonderful things. Congratulations. This is because how your primary caregivers were. The heart, it's an explanation. It's some kind of an explanation. But the heart is not happy at just laying the blame on two individuals who are by nature fallible, the primary caregivers. And therefore, the one has to get to the place where one can truly say that I have made peace with my parentage. I am not stuck with anger and frustration at the non-fulfillment of my raga dvesha in the present and hang it up on the hook of the past, namely the parents. It may start with the parents, yes, because the child is insecure coming into this world, the child adores the parents, and then the child finds that the parents are themselves fallible. The mother drops the child down a flight of stairs. The child is shocked, and the father, feeds something wrong to the child, and again the child is shocked. And so this fallibility is something, which results in the mind of the child as a loss of trust. The loss of trust with regard to the mother and the father that begins at age 2 or 3 has to be regained by daring to trust, by discovering that trust and directing that trust, daring to trust by placing the trust in the mother and the father of the universe. That is the journey of the human being. Until that happens, one can kiss Vedanta goodbye. To such a person of surrender and devotion, you see how you Ishvarize the local mother and father. It's not even actually really Ishvarization. It's a projection. It is called Shobhana Adhyasa. It is a kind of a value added projection, a subjective projection. Seeing in the parents what they are not. They are fallible, but the child thinks them to be infallible. And of course, there is a loss of trust as the child grows up. The child finds them completely and totally fallible, so the trust drops, and the child grows up into a calloused adult, afraid to trust anybody. And when that quantum leap is made, and that quantum leap to trust is made only in the face of these disappointments, nothing is going my way. Whatever I thought I was good at, I am not. So when hopelessness and repeated failure stares at one in the face, that is the time to bend. That is the time to rediscover the trust by rediscovering one's parents, one's true parents, as the mother and the father of the universe. And that is what is the prayer of the mumukshu, the seeker of freedom, the seeker of shreyas, of the jignasu, the seeker of knowledge. Because the seeker of shreyas is essentially the seeker of knowledge, because shreyas is not a product of action, is not a product of sadhana such as yogasanas, meditation, chanting, worship are all auxiliary means to be able to open the mind and ready it for the knowledge, to prepare it for the knowledge. Sadhanas do not produce moksha, because moksha is not a product, it is not a byproduct of karma. It is uncreated because it is limitless, and because it is limitless, it is centered on you. It is you. The so-called difference between you and Ishvara is because of ignorance, not because of time or space. It is because of ignorance. And therefore, when the raga dveshas preponderate, and when there is no other way to fulfill them, and when the jiva is staring at mistrust, hopelessness, and what they consider failure repeatedly, then the mind is directed to the source of the universe. There seems to be some law. Maybe I don't understand the meaning of these laws. Maybe there is a law, and maybe that law, the one who is the giver of the law, maybe it is a law of karma. And so I pray for my karma. At first the person prays for the karma to be neutralized, so that they can get the objects called prayas. They can get objects that come under the pursuit called prayas rather, and they can help themselves. This is what people pray for. Give me this, oh Lord, then after that give me this. Help everybody in my family, help me to have a good life, help me to be prosperous, help me to fulfill my raga dveshas. And like we saw in the previous satsang, nothing wrong. All those devotions, all those forms of devotion are exalted. But then there is an evolution, because when one gets used to a diet of prayer, the raga dveshas become dormant. And prayer, in a way, it elevates the person above the fray of coming under the spell of the raga dveshas. And then one grows to be a mumukshu, a jignasu. And the prayer of the jignasu is slightly different. Yes, keep me well, keep me healthy, keep me strong, keep my mind sharp, so that I can understand this knowledge, so that I can imbibe and internalize this knowledge, so that I can assimilate and abide in these teachings. You see the difference. Help me to be strong, help me to be courageous in the face of the strong misfortunes or called karma. Help me to face whatever there is during the course of the day. This is the jignasu's prayer, because the jignasu's sights are set elsewhere. The jignasu's prayer is, may I never swerve from this knowledge. Maham Brahma nirakuryam, may I never deny Brahman, because it's a form of self-denial. Mama Brahma nirakarot, may I never be under the misapprehension that Bhagavan has abandoned me. These are all prayers from the Shanti mantra. These are one of the Shanti mantras of the Samaveda. This is the prayer. Mama Brahma Nirakuryam, Mama Brahma Nirakarot, Anirakaranamastu, Anirakaranam me astu. Let there be no negation anywhere. So the jignasu, from praying for things and praying for yoga kshema, take care of me, give me this, take away what I don't want, starts to get to the place of maturity for saying yes to life. Instead of always being like a ninja, protective, offensive, defensive, here the person starts to say yes to life. Difficulties, yes, because the difficulties are also Ishvara. The more difficulties if there are in life, that means there is an extra helping of Ishvara in your life. Difficulties, yes, and then you pray for courage to face them. Somebody needs something, yes. This doesn't mean that one doesn't have healthy boundaries, but one is not always afraid of being used, of being abused, of worried about, being exploited. One is not afraid to give. One is not constantly offensive and defensive, and one is ready to serve. Because the word bhakti comes from bhaja, sevayam, in the sense of service. So, from serving the ragadveshas, the person grows into serving Bhagavan in the form of whatever needs to be done. I do what needs to be done in the form of my own swadharma. I do what needs to be done because nobody else is around and I'm the only person around here and I just have to do it, so I do it. I do out of a sense of helping. I do out of a sense of service. And I may not be fully confident, doesn't matter. I pray for strength, I pray for determination, I pray for perseverance, I pray for humility, and I continue to do what I have to do. So the growth of this person from preyas to shreyas is the growth of a person under the spate of ragadveshas and a person who has transcended the ragadveshas. In other words, from being a person who is always looking for things to do that they like, such a person has grown to like whatever one has to do. This is a very beautiful growth. In the beginning, I want to do as I like. I keep wanting yoga and kshema. I want to avoid certain things. I want to approach certain things. And then I want to just do as I like. Then after some dose of bhakti, first disappointment, then bhakti, then the discovery of Ishvara as karma phala data, as the giver of the fruits of action, then what happens? Then there is a growth. I grow into a person that I like whatever I have to do. There is no like and dislike anymore. And such a person has made the crossover, has crossed over from the addiction to preyas to shreyas. And this cannot be done without the help of Bhagavan, without the help of bhakti, without learning to drive the chariot, to drive the ahankara, the body mind sense complex, on the road, on the correct road of dharma, of karma yoga. And the destination is the Upanishad, the destination is Shreyas, the destination is understanding yourself as totally glorious and free. And this is the destination. And we will conclude this, and we will see a little more of how to make friends with this destination and how to abide in this destination. We will see in the next satsang. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you.
We would like to thank very much Swamini Svatma Vidyananda. Let's give her a big hand. This evening, in the evening satsang, she will conclude the teachings on Shreyas and Prayas lessons from the Katha Upanishad. And today we have a yoga class at 8:30 for all levels with Mahadevi until 10. And 4:30 to 6, we have a yoga class with the focus on hip openers with Bhargavi. And evening satsang is at 8 p.m. And upcoming programs on Sunday, we have a free information session to introduce the online TTC. And this is on this coming Sunday, March 28 at 2 p.m. And it will be followed by a free yoga class at 4:30. So we invite you to join, bring your questions to the ashram senior staff. And tomorrow we begin the Easter and